You're listening to
Catholic Sprouts,
the daily podcast for Catholic kids that strives to plant seeds of faith. Hey there, Sprouts. Today is Thursday, March 14th, 2019. We are also, of course, still in the season of Lent. This week on the Catholic Sprouts podcast, we are talking about Jesus Christ, which we will be doing for the remainder of Lent, talking about him as the great teacher. We discussed why God became man, the great act of love that was the incarnation, and also the dangerous and uncertain circumstances that surrounded the birth of Jesus and what all of these things mean. Today, we are going to be talking about a very well-known story from the early life of Jesus Christ, and in fact, the only story that we have of him as a boy. It comes from the Gospel of Luke, and it is about the time that Jesus remained behind in Jerusalem and was found in the temple with the teachers of the faith. So let's talk about this a little bit. So every year, Jesus went with his parents, Joseph and Mary, down to Jerusalem for the feast of the Passover. The Jewish people had certain customs that they would do. It sounded like they were traveling with a big group from Nazareth of family and friends. And that one of the things I like to think about, of course, is that Jesus had cousins and friends, and when the festival was done, they left Jerusalem in a big group, and Joseph and Mary probably assumed that Jesus was with his cousins or with his friends in a different part of the caravan. In fact, we learn from the gospel that they traveled for an entire day away from Jerusalem, probably camped somewhere that night, and that night as they were settling in, they were frantically searching for Jesus and couldn't find him. So they returned to Jerusalem, and the gospel also tells us that they searched for 3 more days in Jerusalem before finding him in the temple sitting with the teachers of the faith. Now let's just pause there for a minute. Imagine with me what your parents would do if you disappeared in a big, dangerous city for 4 days. Ask your parents, ask your teacher, what would they feel? They'd probably be frantic. They would have called the police. They probably wouldn't have slept or ate. They were so worried. And this is probably exactly what Mary and Joseph went through. Okay, so on the 4th day, they find Jesus in the temple. He is sitting with the teachers. He is asking questions, and they are amazed at his response. Okay, what are we supposed to learn from this story if we take Jesus as a teacher? Now, what you should not learn is to run away from your parents. We know that Jesus is sinless and that he didn't intend for his parents to be hurt. We hear, of course, after this that he returned to Jerusalem and was a faithful son, or returned to Nazareth, and was a faithful son. What we should learn is instead this. Jesus, even from an early age, we hear that he is 12 in the story, he had a ferocious desire to learn about God, to discuss God, to teach others about God. He was there for 4 days talking with the teachers, helping them understand, digging into the deep spiritual questions. So that is what we learn. He was ferocious in learning about God and discussing it. That is what we should take from this story, and that is what we should be motivated to do, to learn more, to ask questions, to find answers to these questions, to seek out good teachers and good resources so that we might grow closer to Jesus, more understanding of our Catholic faith, and more able to spread that faith to others, because it is literally the greatest gift that we can give others in our life. And so, Sprouts, I have a challenge for you. I want you to do a little bit of an evaluation. I want you to evaluate how interested you are in your faith. Are you interested? Do you really like to hear Bible stories and have great questions? I hope you do. And if you are kind of shrugging your shoulders that you're not very interested, I want you to really think about that. Why? Why am I not interested? Is there some way that I could become more interested? Is there some sticking point for me? But really evaluate how interested you are in your faith, how ferocious you are in your learning, like Jesus Christ was, and pray to God that you can have that fire, that passion to learn more about your faith and to really grow in that faith because of it.
That's it for Catholic Sprouts today. We'll be back tomorrow, but until then, continue to grow in your faith and truly sprout into the beautiful creation that God intended you to be. One final word to the grown-ups. Thank you so much for listening to the Catholic Sprouts podcast. I would like to invite you to join a special Facebook group just for those that listen to the Catholic Sprouts podcast. We will use this group to connect, to share resources around that week's theme, and simply celebrate raising future saints. To find the direct link to the Facebook group, simply check the notes for this podcast episode.